I feel a fair bit of pressure to conform as a trans woman, to conform to appearing and acting like a cis woman, and I don't agree with that. I'm quite proud to be a trans woman. It carries with it its own challenges, but it also carries with it a lot of pride.
I feel as though that there isn't for me personally.
I'm not sure. I think there's an expectation that I do because I look like I'm in a heterosexual relationship, even though I'm totally not.
I don't know, I never noticed any pressure as a child, but that's because, I didn't really notice anything. So I presume there's less, but I notice it more.
I think now, I'm 21. I think in my heart, I think I feel a lot less pressure to conform to those things, but I don't know I think that might be more to do with me becoming more comfortable with who I am.
There's less pressure for me personally, but I know that there's definitely some communities that are finding more strength to apply more pressure against people. So yeah, it definitely depends on where you are and who you deal with.
I think there's less pressure because there's more acceptance, which is a funny answer because sometimes I think the opposite. It depends a lot where you are.
But I still think that in areas like particularly the workplace, there's a bit more pressure to not necessarily to be cis-het, but to tone down very loud expressions of queerness. And I still struggle with that quite a bit. And I try to tone a lot of who I am and how I present down when I'm in the workplace. So.
Less, I would say. Certainly when I was a kid, there was a very rigid idea of what boys did and what girls did, and even when I was very young, I didn't really fit. Boys played rugby, girls did netball or did dancing or something like that. Boys didn't do those sorts of things, but I did.
Yeah, even the concept of cisgender is a thing people didn't even think about. You either were male or female. The fact that we have words now to actually express this means it must be getting easier. And again, I grew up in a country area in WA. It was very ladies bring a plate. And, everyone had very, very strict gender roles. So obviously, easier now.
Being a bisexual woman, I feel a bit of pressure to look more queer sometimes, just so that people know. I'm worried that I look too straight sometimes, and maybe that's a product of me trying for so many years to be super feminine, to be desired by men, and kind of looking at things through like a male gaze. And now that I'm embracing being bisexual and looking at more things through a female gaze, looking at more like queer media, I'm getting to see all of the amazing things that I can do and be when I'm not trying to be a super cishet.
Great big capital Q love.
I like it.
I love the word queer.
Look, I love the word queer.
I like it.
I like queer.
I enjoy it, yeah.
I love the word queer.
A community of people who stick together.
Part of it was the reclaiming of what had previously been a slur. But the biggest thing for it was the inclusionist nature of it, where it covered everyone.
It feels like an umbrella that fits everybody without being exclusive.
Queer can be all-encompassing.
It describes not only the community but me very well. Being not only queer but a part of the disabled community.
I find it empowering to say that I'm a queer woman. I think a lot of the time when I say that I'm bisexual, people think that excludes trans people or that it excludes non-binary people, and that is so not true.
It explains me perfectly and it makes me feel like I don't have to be normal. I can just be.
We're here, we're queer, it all rhymes.
When I was very young, it was considered a derogatory word, but as I got older and got more involved with the queer community, as I would call them now, it became a much more empowering word, and also a word that encompassed a lot more. So lesbian and gay were very specific things, and often didn't cover everything that was going on in that community. So I found queer an easy fit, and yeah, I still do. I like it as a sort of empowering, encompassing word that doesn't necessarily make judgments about what or who you like or what you're into.
That's something you had this one word that could do all this amazing work, and in fact even Q could do amazing work, because back then it wasn't a conspiracy theory letter like it is now. And I really like the fact that's why you get all those, Bendigo Queer Film Festival, Melbourne Queer Film Festival, like all these queer film festivals all come out at that time because that word suddenly became a thing.
That you're part of the LGBT community?
Queer to me is a happy word. I see queer as just something different, and I like my difference. I like to celebrate difference, and I like to celebrate the difference of others.
I think it's a great sort of, the acronym is ever growing and it's becoming ever more of a tongue twister. So saying queer is quite useful, shorthand, and it's also a really good umbrella term.
I'm quite aware that for some people it created a bit of trauma through their experience growing up, and so I'm quite aware of that.
But I still think it's really important to recognise that for quite a few older people in the community, there's a lot of real trauma associated with that word and a lot of real bullying that they've been through, and acknowledging and accepting when people don't want to be referred to that way and respecting that, because it's very real, the suffering that it's caused over the years. And I think it's great that we've reclaimed it. I think it's great that women have reclaimed slut and, all those sorts of things, but you still have to acknowledge that there are nuances to those conversations, and just because you've reclaimed a word doesn't mean that everyone in your community has.
I perceive it as different to what people would normally see each other, but can also depend. So
it's an interesting word. I just find it encompasses. I think everyone's queer. What is normal? So I think it's just an encompassing word that just covers the spread of humanity. So
kind of encompass a whole pile of different things.
I'm a bisexual man, but my identity is as a queer person. So I love it. Great big capital Q, kind of tattooed on my back.
it shows that I'm my own being through this community, and that I don't have to identify as what other people would want me to.
Authenticity.
Safety to be who you want to be and who you are.
To me, it all comes down to well-being.
I can be me.
Means I get to be who I am and kind of just fit into my own special spot.
I don't have to dress like someone else tells me or act like someone else tells me. I can just be me, and it's the same with anybody else who I meet.
Belonging, a sense of belonging. Before I realised that I was trans, before I came out, I felt really lonely, and I didn't know what was different about me. And once I discovered that and connected with other people who were similar to me, and also other people that celebrate difference and encourage difference, as the community, the queer community does, I felt like I had another whole family, and they embraced me and I embraced them, and they're just beautiful.
I feel like it's like being part of a member of a family, which is quite interesting, because I think a lot of us growing up didn't have strong family connections, and so suddenly have this family where we have a lot in common with some of the members of that family, perhaps not so much in common, maybe some we get along with, some we don't, and that's actually really good.
I don't know, to me the whole community isn't really a community, it's kind of like a union of all those different letters, which is why we still use all those different letters.
But it's also about being part of something bigger than yourself. That's what community is. It's that connection that all human beings need.
there's a safety of finding the community that works for you and the family that works for you. A lot of people don't necessarily have blood family like support, so being able, and we've always been amazing at creating our own little enclaves within society.
I've found, as I've sort of opened up, I've been very shy in my life. As I've opened up, it's just a helpful because you know there's a lot of people out there all having a struggle.
It's my honest self. I've always been attracted to all genders. I use I'm pansexual, but I use the label bi because for my generation, you were either straight, gay, or bi if you were male, and we rarely spoke about non-cisgendered people. But to me, my community is the most powerful thing in my identity. Is that I've been part of an incredibly supportive community for way too many years, and have experienced antagonism from the straight community for many of those years as well. So, my tribe is everything to me. It keeps me safe.
It means being free to be who you are and love who you love. It's been really freeing to be a part of this.
We were just invisible mostly.
Oh, fabulous and awful, sometimes on the same day. My school days were pretty horrific and were not supported by the educators who, I was in their care, and there was violence, there was bullying, there was all sorts of horrible stuff.
I was out at my school in 1984 and there was almost nobody else.
But in my late teens, I fled my little tiny country town and I moved to the big city, moved to Sydney, and I found my tribe. And as soon as I found my tribe, I started to develop an armour.
It was interesting, going back to the idea of family, I remember 60 Minutes doing a story about HIV or something, and my aunt calling out to my mum, "Come in, Kath, that show about the puffs is on." And that realisation that, growing up, you didn't trust your family. You weren't safe with these people. So what, HIV came in the 80s, I guess?
Lesbian and gay was about as broad as it got when I was a kid. I grew up in a period when I was illegal. I grew up in New Zealand. The law changed about certainly gay sexual relationships in 1986, by which time I was well past 18.
There was the famous ad campaign with the Grim Reaper playing 10-pin bowling, and that was very much, when I was coming into puberty. So that idea that sex equals death was very much a kind of vibe.
Basically, I was a working class family. I knew I was transgender from a young age, but there was no information. There was no Google or anything, and I was dyslexic. So, as a young person, I just sort of tried to hide. I was the best behaved kid in school. By behaving, that just gave me a cover.
So when I was a teenager, I didn't really know anybody who was queer. I didn't have anything to do with the queer community, so I think that was a part of my loneliness growing up, was because I didn't have those people around me to support me and encourage me and allow me to be who I am today.
I wasn't really part of it, nor did I really see it, sheltered by my parents.
Well, where I grew up, there wasn't really much of an LGBTQ plus community.
I really didn't know much about the community when I was younger, so I never really knew, the differences, because I've always just seen people as people.
I sadly didn't really see anything. I was very closed off from that a lot as a child, so I didn't really get to know or see it at all. Sad.
I'd say for me, especially when I was younger, I was still questioning a lot, and it was part of the education as well around the community. For me,
yeah, so I think when I was younger, it was just not talked about. I didn't have a peer group. There was certainly no one to date, and now it's a lot more open. Like, I even see my friends' younger siblings, and half of them are queer in some way or another, and I think that's really great.
I went from being illegal to getting married to a man, of all things.
I think awareness has changed a great deal. When I was younger, people might sort of know someone who was gay, whereas nowadays I think a lot of people would say they have gay friends or gay family members or lesbian or LGBTQI generally.
And to think in one person's lifetime, you could journey from, that kind of discrimination to that degree of acceptance. I think it's astonishing.
It's a lot more public now, being queer. There's a lot more of a tribe, which is really lovely. I think there was this horrible period in the middle where we were more obvious, but also more attacked for being obvious. And now it's sort of seems to have come to a part where we're just part of the wider community.
Gays and lesbians really kind of consolidated the lead of the people that started the gay rights movements in the 70s, whereas I think now the trans community is probably in that same position as we were back in the 80s.
The letter of the law is better than it used to be. It doesn't necessarily mean the interpretation or the practice of the law is better than it was, but on the statutes, life looks pretty good for many of us.
Changes. So I have seen a lot more positive representation in media. I have seen legislation starting to change, which is amazing. The birth certificate reform was absolutely fantastic for the trans community. So we can now get identification that matches our identity, which makes a huge difference in somebody's life. And also the marriage equality debate was a challenging time, but what it did do was create conversations in every household.
The various identities in the LGBTIQAA+ community are owning their own space, as well as being collective and part of a large group community. And I think that's just awesome, because the acceptance and the acknowledgement and the celebration of the difference within our community is an amazing thing to see.
Yeah, even in the 10 years that I've been sort of, aware of this stuff and aware of how it related to me, I think that the people along the gender diversity spectrum have come to the forefront a lot more. Like I said, there was barely even any women like lesbian relationships or anything in the media, and the odd gay relationship was always the subject of a tragic story, with gay men, or the gay best friend trope. And when it was that bad, even 10 years ago in the 2010s for me, or late 2000s for me, let alone any kind of trans representation. And it's sort of exploded over the past few years, I guess. And obviously trans people have always existed and will always exist, but they're just part of the conversation now in a way that they never were before, and I think it's really great.
Lots. There's been lots of changes, and for me, probably helpful as the community accepted more and more, that we're a diverse group of people.
Getting to see the marriage equality vote was amazing. I've got so many friends who are going to be having these amazing weddings now. Getting to see more freedom with like having children and things like that. One of my friends has recently had a baby. A couple of them actually have had babies that are same-sex couples, and it just makes me so happy to see that.
More people who are straight supporting the LGBTQ+.
That a lot of people were more open and accepting than I thought.
Being bisexual previously was seen as like attention seeking. It was, it was like I said previously, I was looking at things through a male gaze, and I didn't know why it was so scary to me. But it's nice now that there are so many safe queer spaces.
The fact that more people are becoming more diverse and accepting.
I can be open in myself because I don't have to prove anything.
The next fight is the trans rights fight.
I think the next frontier is gender.
And I see now, our trans brethren going through all the same stuff again.
I think that the trans conversation is in the mainstream is really just beginning.
We probably need to fight for more acceptance of gender diversity.
We still have a long way to go in regards to legislation, particularly for the trans community. There's a lot of laws that we need to address that are outdated and that stop us living our best lives. In Victoria, we've had some wins that other states haven't had, so it would be great to see things like the birth certificate reform Australia-wide, so that we can all have appropriate identification.
The one really, really important thing that can help is that for trans people, the surgery should be covered by Medicare, and there really is no excuse that it isn't.
I think letting go of gender norms, and we're seeing overseas that there are a lot of trans rights bills that are revoking trans rights, which is super upsetting to see.
I think education, I think that is the main issue I find is a lot of the people who are bigoted or homophobic or transphobic, a lot of them are just uneducated. And I don't blame them for that because some of them just haven't been taught themselves.
Even more people being accepting of people of our community.
People that aren't accepting to be more accepting.
Complete and total acceptance, I'd say. Kind of keep it going.
In the last few years, a lot of the world seems to be becoming more conservative, which could be a worry for queer people and all sorts of diverse people.
I think one of the things we have to be very aware of is that the progress we've made can be lost. It's not a permanent thing necessarily. You keep fighting because it can disappear.
I think the main thing is for safety to be the lived expression of how people relate, and I think that's the same for a lot of different diversities, not just ours.
But I also think that intersections really matter, and I know for me, I for a long time identified as bi, and only very recently realised that I was kind of dealing with the double whammy of being a woman and being gay, and that a lot of women feel a lot of pressure, just in general, all women, including heterosexual women, feel a lot of pressure to conform to the male gaze and male ideas of how women should be. So that intersection of being queer and a woman, or, queer and a person of colour, those sorts of things, the experiences are totally different, and a lot of the time the LGBTIQ narrative has been devoted to mostly white gay men, and even though their stories aren't being told in anywhere near the breadth of humanity that they are, it's still been the main lens that everyone's got, and I think we kind of need to push back against that and tell everyone else's stories as well.
Ideally, I would love us to get to a point where we don't have to fight for the things. I feel like we have had to fight, and we actually have to fight, and we stand on the shoulders of giants. But that thing where it would really be nice if mainstream society could just start being a bit more decent about these things.
I think we just have to keep working towards positive attitudes. So not just acceptance. We want encouragement. We want support and love, just like everyone else.
Oh, there have been so many. It's unbelievable. Like, our history is rich. It is beautiful.
Well, I'm a pretty radical person. I tend to go back to Stonewall and stuff because I think that, love a good riot.
Yeah, so the things that happened before I was born, like the partial decriminalisation in the UK in the 60s, which was a huge thing and driven almost entirely by a straight man, I understand. And obviously things like Stonewall, which again had a lot of trans women and people involved. Those people who got up and fought, and I think created the bedrock for everything that came beyond them. Those are the people I'm amazed by.
I am most proud of every LGBTIQ+ person who gets up every day to live their authentic lives despite all the challenges that comes with that.
That you can use the preferred bathroom that you identify as.
I'll probably say kind of the existence being decriminalised, which was really cool.
Personally, I think the fact that bi is actually accepted and used a lot more now is pretty exciting, because I used to be a bi activist when we were just completely invisible, even in the queer community. We were skipped out all the time. We were good for the numbers, but when you actually when it came down to it, we weren't wanted.
I stand on the shoulders of the 78ers, the first Mardi Gras, the people of the first Mardi Gras. They stand on the shoulders of the Stonewallers. They stand on the shoulders of the people who gathered in back alley bars in the 1930s. They stand on the shoulders of the suffragettes and the feminists, because to have a conversation about diversity is to make it a little bit better for the next generation.
The fact that people aren't afraid to be who they are around majority of people.
I think the birth certificate to me is the biggest jump. I was changing my name with birth, death and whatever they were, and they made a mistake and sent out some wrong stuff. But then they sent me an email that said, in May of last year, you can change your gender. Do you want to do it? And yeah, that was great. You can really identify with what you are. I just thought that was great.
I want to say that I see you, I'm proud of you, and together we can do this.
Every single person who doesn't have to come out or doesn't have to make a big deal when they're coming out because people just don't assume that you're cishet. It's really nice. My younger cousin, came out, and it wasn't a big thing. She just was.
I think on a more personal level, the first thing I ever voted in was the referendum on gay marriage, and that meant a lot for me. I don't think that our rights should have been decided by everyone else. I still think it was pretty powerful to know, I'm not particularly interested in marriage, but to know that I could if I wanted to, and that most of society was okay with that, was really, it really impacted me when I was 18, and it was I was on tenterhooks the whole time they were counting it, because I was terrified that we hadn't even moved that far ahead, let alone to any other kind of thing. But it passed, and I remember I was in year 12, and I was it was on lunch and I just burst into tears.
Probably the fact that men can marry men and female can marry female now.
I suppose the one that comes to mind immediately is gay marriage. Not that it was that important that people get married, as I always used to say to people. Not necessarily because it allows us to get married, but because it's saying to the world in general, we are entitled to be treated the same.
My life is happy.
The fact that people have accepted me for who I am and not what they want me to be.
When I got to meet like more people and everyone like accepted me.
So I'm the president of the Rainbow Eagles, which is La Trobe's LGBT plus club, and occasionally we have gatherings in the park. And one of my favourite memories is when we had a park gathering and I thought no one was going to come. And then everyone from the Pride Committee and all of my other friends from the community showed up, and it was just so nice. And there were people who weren't even out or, you know, who weren't sure because they hadn't met many people in our community before, and it was just this beautiful, safe, welcoming space on a sunny day in the park, and that is one of my favourite memories.
Probably meeting the person who is now my partner, because we met when we were both bi activists, and that was sort of one of those completely unexpected things that happens. So yeah, that's probably it.
I'm an optimist, and just knowing that even though things when I was younger were tough, knowing that I am part of a diverse and rich and not beige community that has a whole lot of struggles that we have to deal with, but so many joys.
My favourite thing is when I see a young person realise who they truly are and then are able to be who they truly are, and just all of a sudden realise that they're part of this big family.
Amazing friends, which I get to hang out with pretty much every day.
It was funny, I was at a film festival once and I was watching this queer film and I was thinking how it was slightly ridiculous because it was sort of almost a bit melodrama, like this guy was having these terrible lows and these amazing highs. And then I thought, but that honestly is what the queer experience is. I suspect we do have higher highs and lower lows than perhaps your average heterosexual. And I think just, you know, everything in there from those amazing nights out where just everything was amazing and you could feel the love, you know, to just, all those moments of connection with people and the joy and obviously I have to say marrying my husband because he's in this room and will otherwise get very, very upset.
The happiest moment. So I am president of Trans and Gender Diverse Bendigo and Beyond, and as part of Pride, we hosted a trans clothing swap. And on that day, we had trans, gender diverse and allies all coming together in one space to celebrate and encourage each other, to support each other, to explore different expression through clothing. And it was just such a beautiful space to see everybody just so happy, so feeling so safe with each other. And it was just a moment where community came together and it was so beautiful.
One of the nicest was at this clothing swap. You know, there was an issue, not an issue, this probably 15 or 16-year-old trans boy, trans man, came up and he was just so pleased he found bindings that would fit, and he was just talking, saying, oh, I'm going to start my hormone treatment in 6 months or so. I didn't know there was any age limit, but he was just absolutely bursting with joy. That was nice.
Being able to get married to my husband, I think. Just that the joy of being able to have my relationship recognised by the people I value.
So I have a friend, Ven. They and I met in the line for a gay bar because it was like a block long, and we were both third wheeling our friends, so we kind of became friends ourselves. And they create a series of music. They do like regular music nights called like Femme Fantasy, and it's about celebrating particularly femme queer people and people of colour. And the last one I went to, it was the first time I had gone out since COVID hit. And it was just the most like magical experience, being sort of surrounded by all these amazing, colourful, creative people, and, you know, dancing and singing and, you know, having a blast. And it's just the most accepted and normal I've ever felt.